great Sufi teacher who was probably one of the earliest Sufi teachers that brought Sufism to the United States, to the Western consciousness, had some things to say about this. And Sufism is the mystical branch of Islam. And so at the turn of the 20th century, Inayat Khan came over to the United States and did a series of lectures. And this is something that he said from one of the lectures that he gave in San Francisco in 1923. He said, "And the best way of teaching is by example. Words only annoy. And words without life have no power. What brings the best results is acting on one's own theory, living one's belief, practicing one's idea. This makes one the example of his idea, and then he does not need to say, for he is." He goes on, "Those whose hearts are awakened cannot help but accept the teaching, the thought, the help that is given. But in point of fact, what the great teachers have done is that they have brought to the world a living God. In the world there is a belief in God, but where does one find the living God?" That's a good question, isn't it? Pretty important question. What one wants is the living God. For those who turn their backs on God, it is not for the reason that they're against God, but for the reason that they cannot find the living God. What was brought by the prophets of all times was the living God, to enlighten, to help, to strengthen humanity into perfection. Gandhi said, "We all have our own view of God." We all have our own view of God. Now, I don't know exactly how many people are here today. Now, somebody is going to give me a count. One of the choir members. You haven't counted yet. Okay. Anyway, a few hundred people here today. How many views of God are there in this room? That's right. Now, I have a question for you. If there are as many views of God as there are people sitting in this room today, how in the world can we call ourselves a spiritual community? Because I thought a spiritual community meant everybody had to believe the same thing. I'm pulling your leg. All right. How can it be that we call ourselves a spiritual community and yet we all have a different view of God? We might even call God by different names. We probably have different ways that we experience God. I bet you money we've got different spiritual practices that we do. I bet there's some people in here that do affirmations, and you know what? I bet there are other people in here that have never done an affirmation in their life till this morning when I made you. How can that be that we call ourselves spiritual community? I believe it's because of what Inayat Khan said. Because it really doesn't matter, frankly, what we believe. It doesn't matter what words we use. It doesn't matter what practices we use. What matters is that we are gathered together in unity because we have a hunger and we have a thirst to experience, to live, to share the living God. Am I right? And my friends, that is, to me, what spiritual community is all about. I grew up in a religion that there were many, many things about it that were a blessing to me, and there were other things about it, things that I learned, that's not how I want to do, you know? I don't want to live like that. But in that spiritual community, in every spiritual community that I've ever been in part of my life, there were some people that I liked to be around and some people that I didn't. And the ones that sort of scared me were the ones that were really rigid. And the ones that said, if you have to believe it this way, you have to say it that way, you have to do these things, and if you don't, you're going to burn in hell for a really long time. And I was young and I wasn't interested in that, okay? Those people scared me, and I was only around them when I had to be. And there were other people in that church community that maybe they said some things about how they saw things or whatever, but they weren't so rigid. They weren't so stuck about how it had to be, and they weren't really talking about the licking flames and all that business. They were people that were kind, they were caring, they took time to connect, They took time to ask me, even as a little child, how are you today? And listen to me. They were the people that taught me through their actions and through everything about their energy field. This is the love of God. Now those people I wanted to hang out with. And I didn't understand it as a child. I had no concept to explain it or anything like that. But somehow inside of me, I didn't tell anybody this, of course. I kept this to myself. But somewhere inside of me, I thought, that's got to be God. I don't know what this other stuff is. It scares me. But this, whatever it is, that's got to be God. I just know it. And I believe that is that innate knowing because it's our innate nature. And I believe all of us know that by whatever words we use, but all of us know that. I want you to join me in a moment and use your power of imagination. And I'm going to ask you to imagine something really big. I want you to imagine a wagon wheel that is large enough that every single person in the world can stand around it. Can you do that? You see that kind of? Or some version of it? And imagine that every person is standing at a certain spoke, at a given spoke. So that we're all standing around this wagon wheel, and each of us is standing right, facing in on a certain spoke. And at the center of that wheel, of course, we know is the hub. Now, in the real world, in a wagon wheel, you need both the hub and you need the rim. If you don't have the hub and you don't have the rim and you don't have the spokes, that wheel's not going to work. And so, we've got to have all the parts. None of the parts are better than the other parts. They're all needed. The hub, the spokes, and the rim and the wheel are all absolutely necessary for that wagon wheel to go down the road. Now imagine in this vision again where you see all the people standing around the wheel and they're standing in each at a different spoke. Imagine that all the people are looking toward that hub. Now spiritually, that hub is God. That hub is God. It's the place where we experience our oneness. It is that creative life force out of which everything comes. All creation is an expression of that life force. Now imagine again if all of us are looking toward that center and we're all traveling along our individual spoke toward that hub. You can imagine how beautiful that is and harmonious it is. And there we are on parallel paths coming into that oneness. And we can look around and we can see the beauty and we can see how interesting it is that everybody's path is heading the same way, but it's in a little bit different place on the wheel. The beautiful thing about rounds and about wheels is that everybody's equal. When you're in a circle, there isn't anybody that's higher than anybody else. That's why support groups meet in circles. Because it's a fellowship. And everybody is an equal. Everyone has an equal voice. And everyone's reality is of value. And so we're on that wheel and we're all of value. And it's a harmonious and wonderful experience. And it's interesting to see how everybody else is traveling. But now I want you to change that image a little bit and imagine that instead of everybody looking toward the hub, that now everybody's just sort of looking around at everybody else on the periphery. And they are saying, well, why in the world are they standing on that spoke? That's not the right spoke. My spoke is the right spoke. And imagine the whole world doing that. It's kind of noisy, isn't it? And it's pretty disharmonious. That's what happens to us when we start looking around at everybody else and getting ourselves in a knot about how they are finding their way to God. I have not found that to give me a serene or peaceful day. And I go there, trust me. But when I am looking to God, then I become very interested in how it is that everybody else is traveling. That's the big deal about love. That when we're all accepting that we're all traveling on a different path, but it's all God, then that's when we are in love. Love is who we are. Love is that power that is our innate oneness. And when we can value and honor and care about and respect one another, then we are expressing harmony that is the expression of love in our lives. Love remains sort of dormant in us until we do the work to express it, to bring it into harmony, to learn to connect, to respect, and to communicate with one another. I'm going to tell you a shocking thing, so you've got to pretend like you're shocked, okay? Can you do that? Okay, here's the shocking thing. Spirituality has nothing to do with what you believe. Spirituality is about how you act. Thank you. Thank you for humoring me. Spirituality is about how we act. Back to those people where I grew up. What people believed didn't make any difference to me. And the ones that were scared were scary. But the ones that were expressing that love, that have the actions of love, ooh, those are the ones that made my heart open up. Those were the ones that gave me a gift. The Buddha said it this way: a family is a place where minds come in contact with one another. If these minds love one another, the home will be as beautiful as a flower garden. But if these minds get out of harmony with one another, it is like a storm that plays havoc with the garden. The Dalai Lama says it this way: love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. Our brother and way shower, our friend Jesus Christ, said it this way: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And what was the next line? Your neighbor as yourself, for on all this hangs all the law and the prophets. The Apostle Paul said it this way in the letter to Corinthians. And if you would like to follow this along in the Bibles, in one version of the Bibles, it's on page 183, and the other is page 153. We are a diverse congregation. Okay, so those are the Bibles in the back of the pew. And this is that beautiful passage on love. It's so beautiful. So in the first few verses, Paul is telling us how important love is, how essential it is, that it's the true spirituality. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. So friends, it doesn't matter how much we can impress each other. If we're not loving, Paul says, it's not worth anything. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but don't have love, I gain nothing. So no matter what our sacrifices are, if we're doing it not from love, it's not going to really benefit to the fullest. Now he tells us what love is. He tells us the actions of love. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way, it's not irritable or resentful, and it doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, but it rejoices in the truth. Pretty simple. Reads easy, does hard. And then in the next couple of verses, he tells us how powerful love is. He tells us actually that it's the greatest power. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Anytime you love, friends, it is never wasted. However you've loved, whatever you thought about, whether it did or didn't come back to you, I guarantee you it made a difference. That you lit up a light in this world. Charles Fillmore, our co-founder of our Unity movement, said this about love. He said, never let the evils and the problems of life keep you from loving. Rather, let the problems of life and any evil you may see be an incentive to love more.